exposure to public service was visiting underprivileged children and arranging care packages for typhoon victims. Having seen so much suffering in the Philippines, I didn't really expect to continue service when I left for the Stanford bubble. This was until I learned of an opportunity called the Stanford Alternative Spring Break Program, or ASB. So what exactly is ASB? ASB is a program in which around a dozen students attend a spring break trip that allows them to explore an issue during the course of spring break by visiting relevant communities and organizations. Some ASB trips promote themselves as something fun that students can do. Some promote themselves as a way of saving the world. More recent programs, however, promote themselves as a way to both serve and learn. As well as other researchers also describe ASB as a form of service and learning, or simply service learning, which is defined as a method in which students learn and develop through service experiences that meet actual community needs. Stanford's own ASB motto starts with the words transforming students, which touches on the learning aspect. However, it finishes off with the words into advocates of social change, which also hints at the service aspect. In my research, I posed the question, is Stanford able to form a good balance between service or learning, or does it tend to tilt one way rather than the other? So I will do this by analyzing the program's three main aspects. First is its duration. Because of ASB's short-term nature, both the students and the communities find it hard to set goals for each other. As a result, there tends to be little or no concrete change onto the communities, but a lot of concrete change onto the students themselves. Despite the short duration, the students seem to take a lot from their many brief drive-bys. Even the communities agree that they help the students more than the students help them. In one of my own surveys, a representative from the Filipino Community Center said, quote, "Working with ASB participants has hardly extended beyond the 1 week that they visited us. Due to the nature of the program and the distance of Stanford from the FCC, we don't really benefit in the long term." In my own research, both the participants and the communities note that a week wasn't enough time to evoke concrete change. Professors from Vanderbilt University, the first university to do ASB, said that the highest quality programs span a year or more. So what are the effects of this on the community? In last year's post-trip evaluation, many students noted that there wasn't enough direct service during the trip. Even studies on the effects of ASB mostly discuss the changes due to the learning and not enough on the changes due to the service. It was as if it wasn't crucial that the students learn how to properly carry out the service, as long as they were learning something in the process. In their book, The Unheard Voices, community researchers Randy Stoker and Elizabeth Trian note that communities sometimes feel like free sources of student education. But since little can be done about this lack of time, Stanford decided to incorporate a group-directed reading in its structure, in which the students are required to take a 1-unit class in the winter. This leads us to the next aspect, which is structure. Stanford's inclusion of a curriculum-based aspect intensifies the learning experience, but with little indication of how much this actually helps them improve their quality of service. There's also the danger that this added knowledge makes the students feel above the communities. Kelly McElhaney of UC Berkeley concludes that combining service with an academic course enriches the learning experience. In her study, she noted that those who took the class beforehand learned more than those who did not. But what does this mean for the communities? In spite of all this enriched experience, it can also be argued that the class doesn't necessarily improve the quality of service. The authors of The Unheard Voices also worry that some trips may in fact reinforce negative stereotypes rather than challenge them. In my paper, I argue that this could possibly occur if the students feel like they know more about the issue than the communities, and therefore see them as helpless and them as the heroes, which is in fact reinforcing the negative stereotype. Those Stanford students who were able to relate well with the communities were those that had similar experiences. Like, for example, the Stanford students who were Filipino immigrants who visited the Filipino Community Center. In order to make sure that the students do useful service, some programs involve faculty and staff with more experience. This leads us to the final characteristic, which is people involvement. Stanford's program, however, is almost completely student-led. Although this allows for a better bonding between the participants, because of the lack of a mediating faculty member, some ASB teams tend to relate less with the communities and more with each other. All research I found noted that student-led ASB trips fostered excellent group dynamic among the participants. In researches about long-term service learning, it was found that this positively affected the manner in which they carried out the service. However, after doing my own research, I found that this was not the case for short-term programs because they don't have as much time to bond with the communities. Although some scholars like Wendy Barkley note that faculty and staff are crucial to the program, John McConnell, faculty advisor of the ASB, even admits that this is not the case for Stanford because they play a sort of smaller role in Stanford's ASB. I speculate that this is partly because the student leaders were either past participants or had discussed the issue in the past. Student-led trips promote leadership among students and encourage them to explore the issue for themselves. But what does this mean for the communities? One danger of a better dynamic is that students tend to stick with each other and relate less with the communities. Imagine adding this on top of the adverse effects of both the short-term and the curriculum-based natures. We can see that behind all its success, Stanford's ASB may in fact have some negative impacts on the communities. After analyzing these three main aspects, I conclude that although ASB succeeds in creating student advocates with thorough knowledge on a certain issue, the service aspect of the program isn't as clearly met. In order to address these, I came up with three main things that ASB can improve on. First is commitment. From my research, the program's benefits to the students are clear. There is indeed a transformation that occurs within the students. As a result, the program's long-term effect is largely dependent on what they do in the future. These leadership skills will only prove useful when they go back to build better relationships in the future. Although the communities are somehow reduced with exhibits, the learning that occurs seeks to create not only service leaders, but educated citizens. John McConnell, faculty advisor of the ASB, claims that putting students at the leadership role even furthers this development. From my own research, it was clear that some ASB participants did in fact continue their service efforts, or even went on to discuss the issue in other circles with other people, which many agree is itself a form of social change. Next is communication. The recipient communities could also learn and benefit from the program if there is communication between both parties to set clearer goals. Hilary Douglas, Assistant Director of Community-Based Scholarship at the Haas Center, says that ASB isn't quite a balance of service learning because, quote, the community partner should be as much of a teacher as the professor is. However, because of the lack of both faculty involvement and community partnership, this goal of service learning isn't met. Lastly, we have connection. This can also be resolved by more interaction between the students and the communities. This lets the students feel less like saviors and more like partners. Because the strip's short-term nature doesn't allow for the development of a deep relationship, the students can either invite the communities as guest speakers, or maybe even just study them a bit more beforehand. This can also make it easier for the students to then commit in the future. By improving on these three key things, Stanford's ASB will become more than just a factory of service leaders and educated citizens, but actually a program that galvanizes the many small steps towards a time-consuming path to social change. We can see that Stanford's ASB in fact transforms students and impacts some social change, just not the kind that directly affects the communities that they visit. But if the students that ASB produce seek to improve their commitment, communication, and connection, then maybe in fact social change will become a central goal for the program. In my research, I believe I have broken ground on what the program is all about, and I hope to apply my suggestions as I continue my involvement in ASB and even as I seek to make social change back home in the Philippines.